This is the visual field test, and this is a test that Dr. Thompson wants you to have done today. And what this does is it checks for lots of different ocular diseases and disorders that can be hard to catch otherwise. Things like glaucoma, diabetic retinopathy, retinal detachment, and lots of others. And the important thing about this machine is that it can actually catch those things in the very early stages. And that matters because if we can catch those things early, then they're a lot more treatable. And that's obviously very important. Now it's $15, and for someone like you, because you have a family history of diabetes, you should know that you're actually at higher risk for diabetic retinopathy in particular. So that's why Dr. Thompson wants you to have it done, okay? Now, let's talk about that visual field script and why it can be very successful. And let's start at the very top. The very first thing we do is say, this is the visual field test. And notice that when I do that, I am gesturing to the machine. I point that out, and it seems very basic, but I point that out because I've seen a lot of stores and VA techs optometric technicians that will gesture to the actual selection page rather than the machine itself. This is the visual field test, but this isn't the test. This machine is what does the test. So that's important. We just want to eliminate confusion for your customers who are hearing this for the first time as much as possible. So this is the visual field test, and this is a test that Dr. Thompson wants you to have done today. That was the next step. You'll notice that I use the doctor's name, and you'll want to do that too. Your doctor's name carries a lot of weight with your customers because it's not just you making this recommendation, it's the doctor that's making the recommendation, so use their name. And then your customers will take that opinion very, very solidly. So the next thing after that is I say, Dr. Thompson wants you to have this done today. Now, that's important because I'm not talking about every doctor wants everybody to have this done once a year or periodically or every now and then. I'm not talking about everybody. I'm talking about you. And I'm not talking about once a year periodically. I'm talking about today. The doctor wants you to have this done today. So be very specific with your customer. So this is the visual field test. Dr. Thompson wants you to have this done today, and then go on to tell them what it does. It checks for lots of different ocular diseases and disorders. And when you do this, you can say that in any way that's comfortable for you. Lots of eye problems, ocular issues, diseases, whatever feels good for you. But tell them what it does in a general sense. This checks for lots of different eye problems. And then go on and list a few specific items. And choose your favorites, diabetic retinopathy, retinal detachment, glaucoma, macular degeneration. I mean, just pick your favorites, list 2 or 3 specific ones, and then always end with, and lots more. Because you don't want in their head for them to be thinking, macular degeneration, glaucoma, check, no, I'm fine, and then move on. So leave it open to, it checks for lots more than you can actually list. So it checks for 1, 2, 3 specific examples, and lots more. So this is the visual field test. Dr. Thompson wants you to have this done today. It checks for lots of different eye diseases and disorders like glaucoma, diabetic retinopathy, retinal detachment, and lots more. And that's important because this machine can catch them in the very early stages. This is really key. We want to make sure we emphasize that this machine catches those things really early. And it's important that that is a separate point, right? Because you want each point to have its impact on the customer. You don't want to just cram it all together into one run-on sentence. You want it to have its impact. So it catches these diseases, and it catches them in the early stages. And then, separate thought, if we can catch them early, they're a lot more treatable. So again, that needs to be a separate thought so that it's not all, because you could just say, it checks for lots of different diseases and disorders in the very early stages, and that makes them more treatable. One big quick sentence, but the problem is saying that much stuff in one sentence will cause them to check out, and they may not receive the message, and your words won't have the impact that they could have if we just slow down and add a little pause in between. So it checks for lots of different eye diseases and disorders like glaucoma, diabetic retinopathy, retinal detachment, and lots of others, and this machine can catch them in the really early stages. And that's very important because if we can catch these things in the early stages, they're a lot more treatable. So that's why it's especially important. From here, we move on to the price. So that's why this machine is very important. It's $15, and for someone like you, and then we move on. you'll notice that when we go through this, we don't say the price and hang on it, because we don't want that to be, the price is not the selling point. We just want to list that as a matter of fact. It's $15 and move on. You also don't want to sound like a used car salesman. It's only $15. Well, that is a really great price, but that again is not the selling point. It's $15, and for someone like you, because you have a family history, so then move on. Don't wait for the awkward pause. It's $15, and for someone like you, and then here is where we make it specific. So far we've talked very generally about the test itself, and now we're going to get very specific about the customer personally, right? So it's $15, and for someone like you, because you have a family history of diabetes, you're actually at higher risk for diabetic retinopathy in particular. So what we did there was say, move from the price directly into something personal, and we refer to their medical history. So if you can see on their medical history that they have a history of diabetes, then you would say, it's $15, and for someone like you, because you have a family history of diabetes, you're actually at higher risk for diabetic retinopathy in particular, so that's why this is especially important. If they have a family history of high blood pressure, then you could say, it's $15, and for someone like you, because you have a family history of high blood pressure, that puts you at a higher risk for hypertensive retinopathy in particular, so that's why this is very important. Or, the other one that I use very often is if they're nearsighted. So, it's $15, and for someone like you, because you're nearsighted, what you should know is that the more nearsighted you are, the more at risk you are for retinal detachment in particular. So that's why this is especially important for you, okay? So, refer to their medical history, we name the price, refer to their medical history or their family medical history, and make it very specific about what they're at higher risk for. And with those three, blood pressure, diabetes, and nearsightedness, that catches 99% of people. And then, so we refer to their medical history, make it very specific, and then re-emphasize that that's why this is important, and then we ask the question. And the question is not, do you want to do this, yes or no? Because then the last thing that they heard was no, and that will be what sticks in their head. So rather than saying, do you want to do this, yes or no, we say, that's why this is important, okay? And that's the question. So that's why Dr. Thompson wants you to have this done, okay? I'm asking. And then the key is, wait for the response. Wait for them to respond. And they're either going to respond with, okay, that sounds good, or they'll respond with, no way, Jose, I don't want to do it, or they'll ask clarifying questions. Wait, how much was it again? Or tell me why this is important, or how does it work, right? So those are the key. Wait for a response, and then respond to their response. And then from there, all you have to do, grab your selection pad and say, go ahead and make your selection here at the bottom, and then sign and date it. You'll notice again that I didn't say check yes or no, because what was the last thing that they heard? No. And I don't want that to be the last thing they hear. So I'll say make your selection at the bottom, and then sign and date it here. And it's as simple as that. The real key to this is to make sure that each element of our script gets its own impact. And you do that by making eye contact. So at each major point, reestablish your eye contact. And you don't want to just sit and read something to them and make no eye contact, because that seems very robotic and very distant, and you won't have made any connection with your patient. But at the same time, you don't want to stare them down awkwardly either, because that's weird and that is not effective either. So what you want to do is make eye contact and then reestablish that eye contact at every major point that you make. So reestablish eye contact. It's very difficult to sound robotic and scripted if you're looking somebody right in the eye, because then it comes across as much more conversational and much more personal. And then let each point receive its own impact before moving on to the next point. And with that, you should find great success.